as this is a continuation, we're going to jump right in. If you have not watched part 5, go back and watch it first, because this video needs that foundation in order for you to continue. We left off with the Greek rendering of the Hebrew word Yahudim or Yahudi. Hebrew is its origin, and this is no surprise to the Greeks. They knew this, so they were not attempting to create a new word here, nor new sounds, but to match the Hebrew as closely as they could, because that's how you translate from one language to the other. See, this word transliterate is where a lot of deception comes in, because things typically don't need to be transliterated. They only need be translated because they are equivalent or very close in equivalency. And in this case, it definitely is. To the right, our Greek language chart, including a chart at the bottom with what they call diphthongs, which are basically letter combinations. You don't need to understand that completely, but you can read the chart and you can see for yourself how this matches the Hebrew. From this chart, you can see the English word demonstrating the pronunciation, and this is helpful. Again, we are not linguists, and we do not wish to be, but anyone can read a chart like this, and no one can dispute its accuracy really, because we already know the origin of this word and the pronunciation of Yahudim in Hebrew. So wouldn't you think they would attempt to at least come close in the Greek? Well, they should, unless they're trying to deceive you, right? The first letter, iota, like the I, but pronounced like the I in marine. So it's an E sound, indisputably, but it has a bit of an EY, especially when you add the next letter. No, it's not Y, and we did not say it was. Hello. But the sample pronunciation, it's attempting to copy here the Hebrew Y. This was the closest they had in Greek. And actually, when you add the second letter, you'll see it's actually pretty close. And that will do. The second letter is basically an O, but as pronounced in the English word, pot, at, ah. So what do we have? Yeah. Is it the exact same? Well, no, and we didn't say it was, but that's not the intent here for us, nor those that translated this initially. But almost. And that is exactly what one would expect when translating from one language to another. Not some completely different pronunciation with different letters, different sounds, when the original ones, the original sounds, exist in both languages or pretty close to it. That would be nonsense and confusion, and we know where that comes from. Then we basically have a U with the sound lute. Ooh. Oh, look, it's Yahoo. Boy, that's pretty close, isn't it? Well, let's see. What is it not? Well, that's not Jew, is it? No. It's not you. Okay, you want to replace the J with the Y, because there was no J and it would be a Y. You is also wrong. It would be shortened as Yas. Okay, never Jews. And anyone shortening it to Jew obviously is speaking a different language. And when I say different, not Hebrew, not Greek, not Aramaic, not Latin, not ancient English, not ancient French or Old French, and not Old German. None of it, because we already proved to you there was no J there at all. This or that is contrived. This is how we pronounce that, and it makes perfect sense, and it matches. That's the way this should be. And there's the D, Yahud. So far, almost the exact same word, isn't it? And more so, guess what? Those using this name in Greek still knew how to pronounce it in Hebrew. They were going for Yahudi. They didn't make up a new name, and it's nonsense to say that they did. They patterned it after the original Hebrew, which is what every translation should do logically. Otherwise, it's completely illogical, and it should be rejected as such every time, especially by, well, scholars, one would think. Now's where we have our first Greek combination, or diphthong. A and I together produce the sound as in aisle, basically an I. And look, still following the original model very closely, Yahudi. This is where it deviates, the ending. Basically, OS, if you were to call this in English letters, but pronounced similar to Oz. This is the kind of reconciliation one would expect, and really not problematic at all. It doesn't lead to deception. It doesn't lead to a totally different word. It's still very close. But no need for a completely new word here, is there? You can see that. So in basic terms from non-linguists, admittedly, who certainly know how to research, and no one can dispute that, this word is simply put Yahudius. It's very close to Yahudi. And once again, does it shorten to Jew? No. It's still Yaz, just like the Hebrew in the Greek. It doesn't have a J because that did not exist in the ancient language of any of these languages. It doesn't have an E, and it's not W, it's U. So other than that, well, you know, a little thing like missing all three letters in the word Jew, it's a perfect match. Other than that, sure. Not. That's called fraud. And it's time we call it out. And you know you will get that here on this channel. Some will jump in and attempt to debate that, well, you know, the diphthong is pronounced with an ancient accent or some trivial thing like that. Who cares? That's missing the point. The point is we can all take a look at these things for ourselves and check up on these so-called scholars and linguists. And we better, because clearly they are deceived as well, if not the deceivers themselves. They'll actually try to justify the use of the word Jew, and you can go on to hermeneutics and all of these different things. They assume an awful lot to get to the word Jew. And the reason they do that is because they've been programmed to think that way. They don't know any better. And you know what? We didn't either at once. Until we did what the Bible says. And we decided that we're going to prove all things. We're going to test it to make sure it's right. Because that's what we're supposed to do. Otherwise, we will be deceived. And we're tired of being deceived. Well, we've actually heard some commentaries from this one preacher, Messianic preacher, who just throws out all the time. In fact, he was in a debate with a friend of ours, and He says, "Oh, I know Hebrew better than you because I went to Hebrew University." Well, that's nice. You went to Jew U. But you know what? That simply means you are further behind in this journey from what we're finding. And you have a lot more junk to overcome to get back to square one before you can even learn. And that's where we are in history today. We are in the days where evil is being painted as good and good is evil. And if you don't see that, then you're not even at square one. We believe that our viewers are aware, and that's why we cover these kinds of things. Yeah, we go deep, but this is important. We need to know this. We need to know this deception. We need to know where it comes from, and we need to know that those in Israel who call themselves Jews are doing so not just inappropriately, but blatantly, overtly, deceptively. Not the average Jew who doesn't know the difference. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about the hierarchy and the infrastructure. And who's behind that? Not a man. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with the principalities and powers of darkness. And we identify the exact demon, principality that we're dealing with here. Who is the origin of this? In our next Lost Tribes series, and it will blow you away. And by the way, for those who get confused by the Hebrew to Greek translations, or more so, claiming the Greeks just didn't know, so they had to make up new words, here are samples of the original Greek Septuagint from as old as 200 BC. That's before Christ. Still means that, by the way. Or Messiah, who they say there's no proof he ever lived. Well, there it is right there, because BC meant before Christ for a very long time. And AD actually was after his dissension initially. We know those are reframed now, but that's not their original intent. So that alone proves that he existed, whether alone, much historical documentation on that. Look how they treated the name of God. This is the Old Testament translated into Greek, but not the name Yahuwah. They simply wrote it in Hebrew because they were capable of writing those letters too. Can you imagine that? You mean a Greek could actually form a Hebrew letter? No, it can't be, because nobody could possibly understand another culture and how it writes its letters. No, and they didn't know the origin of Yahuwah. No, they didn't know. They just didn't know. Only stupidity would lead to such a position. Yet that is the position of many scholars. The notion that cultures were so separated is highly deceiving. The notion that history is separated, that every empire is separated, that every country is separated, is absolute bogus nonsense, and history bears out a different record. It's all connected, and it's all a chain reaction. For every action, there is a reaction, right? They were not getting this at all. And look what they used. Not modern Hebrew or even late, but ancient Paleo-Hebrew letters in the Greek Septuagint. So did they know the name of Yahuwah? You better believe they did. Did they know how to pronounce it? You better believe they did. This is further evidence that this whole narrative is absolutely a false paradigm, what we're being told is. Later copies found in the Dead Sea Scrolls have Iota, Alpha, Omega as the name of Yahuwah. Once again, it's extremely close to Yah. Again, these are the kinds of reconciliation one would expect language to language, but not inserting new letters and sounds and completely changing the word and then shortening it to a three-letter word in which neither of the three sounds are even existent in the original word in the first place. That's just plain deception. So that's Yahudim, Yah's people. And we know Israelites are named after Israel, Jacob. That's Jacob's name, given by Yahuwah. But what about Hebrews? Let's explore that. Well, there is much confusion here too, but we'll break it down. It's actually very simple. The patriarch of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, according to the source, Genesis 10, the Table of Nations, which actually begins the lineage of Shem this way. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder, even to him were children born. What a way to start Shem's lineage, with Eber, all the children of Eber. Eber wasn't even Shem's son. He was his great-grandson or great-great-grandson or something like that down the line. So why Eber? Why are they being singled out here? Because Eber's children carry his name. Yes, his exact name, meaning from Eber, Hebrew. Now, for instance, Abraham was the first in the Bible called Abraham the Hebrew. Some actually attempt to say, since that's the first time the word Hebrew appears in the Bible, and it is, that's true, it means the word did not exist until then. In other words, Moses made it up? Well, from where, right? I mean, it would have to have some kind of origin, right? Moses didn't just go making up words. That's what they're concluding. Follow the so-called logic. Your great-grandfather was named Smith, and you are named Smith, or if we look at ancient times, they didn't have last names. They were identified with their people group, very regular. So you are identified as Bob the Smithite. Now, would there really be any question that the name, though, applied to you, Smithite? Well, of course it does. And perhaps it had never been written down before. Okay, that would be fine, right? But would you be the origin of the word Smith, Smithite? Of course not. Grandpa Smith would be, wouldn't he? I mean, this is obvious. This doesn't require a whole lot of logic. But it's a rather ignorant position to take, especially considering the Hebrew letters. When you really break them down, look at the word Eber and the word Hebrew. It is the exact same word, except, just as in Yahudi, the Yad on the end, which really just marks the possession of the first part of the word as those bearing the name of Eber's generations, which is just perfect logic. We keep seeing all these different pronunciations, by the way, with completely different letters, as if there were no precedents whatsoever in the Bible. And that is confusion and nonsense, and we reject it. We've called it out already, but we'll continue to. They take you into this whole paradigm, and this is on purpose, where they control the flow of information. Now, when I say they, the average scholar doesn't realize that's what he's doing. It's what he's been trained to do to keep the paradigm going, to keep the false narrative flowing. And the interpretation is only controlled by them. You aren't allowed, you aren't qualified to actually read something for yourself and say, well, wait a minute, I don't think that's what it says. Well, I know that's not what it says. And that's where you'll end up on a lot of this stuff, as we have. Because, well, it's, they say, well, you know, sometimes it's, this word is Eber. And sometimes it's pronounced Ibri. And then it could be Iber or Ivor or Ivri. Really? I mean, do you really think Yahuwah God is the author of that kind of chaos? Because remember, Hebrew is the language of creation, according to Jubilees. So is Heber, Eber, Ibri, Iber, Ivri, I mean, all of these different pronunciations. It's nonsense. It has one pronunciation in history. But it doesn't matter which one you choose. It needs to be consistent from one word to the next. When you have the word Eber and the exact same letters in Hebrew that only add the one letter on the end, it actually is the same word with an additive. So let's go with Eber to be consistent with a lot of scholars. So if his name is Eber, then the word called Hebrew is actually Ibri. It's Eber with an I-Y on the end, denoting people of Eber, just as the Israelites denote people of Israel, just as the Yahudi denote people of Yahuwah. These are Eber's people, just as Israelites are Israel's people. Remember, Jacob renamed Israel by Yahuwah God. Well, this is not so complex, and even if we are not 100% on every accent, which we're not trying to be, nor are we going to study the language for years and years and years and years before we're even allowed to create a video because we don't have the authority. Bull. We don't bother with such nonsense because we know better. We're seeking the truth here, and you and I can find it. We don't need scholarly nonsense to get there. Even Abraham has only 2 of the letters in the word Hebrew. So no, Abraham, the name, the word Abraham or Abram, is not the origin of the word Hebrew. That is just not supported logically. But obviously it is from Eber. And those from Eber are Hebrews. Now, obviously, modern Israel doesn't want you to know that. And that's why they tell a different story. Otherwise, how would they even know to call Abraham a Hebrew? The word came from somewhere. Moses didn't just go and make up words, right? And he didn't speak Hebrew. Abraham didn't. He didn't know Hebrew yet, according to the book of Jubilees. Not at that point. Yet he was called the Hebrew. Where does that come from? It comes from Eber. And Eber, by the way, comes from the language name, Hebrew. See? Not so difficult at all. That really seems stretched and contrived when they give us these narratives, and we just got to spend some time ironing them out. This is why we all need to test all things. What's really odd is we've been taught to say the word Hebrew, yet it does not start with a hey or an H at all, does it? Here's the name Heber, and see, it starts with an H or a hey. Hebrew does not. It's really Ibri, not Hebrew, yet they had to change that to using a beginning letter that isn't even there. More fraud, really. One last thing, and we will end this video. Some have said, well, we know Israel is the true Israel because, well, the current prime minister has a Hebrew name which means gift from God. And that's true, sorta. We will confirm Netanyahu means gift from God, indeed, or similar in Hebrew. However, he and the Pharisees have to admit the name Yahu represents Yahuwah, God, which they do not yet. They use it in his name and say it's God. How about that? Now worse, his father chose this name, Netanyahu, as that's not their family name. He changed it, really arrogantly. Here's Netanyahu's father, Ben Zion Netanyahu. Well, not really. He chose that last name. His name was actually Milukowski, or however you say that, and he was born in Warsaw, Poland, the Russian steppes, not Israel. He did not have a Hebrew name. He chose one. We don't have a problem with that, but no one can use this to support the case that modern Israel is the fulfillment of prophecy, and that's really the point here. Notice how they put the pronunciation, though, and this is very telling. Jahu, C-J-A-H-U. They're infusing Yiddish into it to make it sound like it's pronounced Jahu instead of Yahoo, yet everyone pretty much pronounces the name Netanyahu, even themselves. Because we've seen plenty of clips where he said the name Yahoo. So that's rather fraudulent for whoever wrote this article in Wikipedia. And they also add a J in the middle of the pronunciation of Zion. Zion? Is that how you say that now? Did that change too? Are they trying to change that word too? It's nonsense. Yet they set the rules, and you have to listen to them and play by their rules because they control modern Israel and Hebrew University, Jew U. If you actually try to figure it out for yourself, you will see just how foolish this is, which is why you have to prove all things. Again, for a linguist to take this direction in rendering Zion, which does not have a Y or J in the middle, to add a J, and as well as Jahu instead of Yahoo now, well, this is just more leaven. You can see where they're heading here. And maybe in 100, 200 more years, if everything played out that long, we may be looking at Netanyahu instead. Maybe that's where they're heading, because that's what they do. By the way, not the only name change in his lifetime, and this is fascinating.
As my first witness, Mr. Benjamin Natai.
Mr. Natai, welcome to the Advocate.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Mr. Natai is a graduate of MIT. He is an Israeli, and he is a man who has written widely on this question before the House tonight.
Did you know he graduated from MIT and was an economic consultant? You know, Wall Street? Again, we don't have an issue with him shortening his long name in the U.S. for college perhaps and in business to Natai. Though that would seem rather unnecessary and impertinent, as there's many people with long names in business and in college, and really not something that any Americans have really had any issue with. And it doesn't bother us that his real name is the Polish Milukowski. That's fine, not a big deal. But just don't call him the fulfillment of prophecy based on his name because of his Zionist activist father choosing to arrogantly call their family a gift from Yahuwah God, Yahu. Ultimately, the point of this video is there is a massive disconnect between those who call themselves Jews and the words used in Scripture. Neither letter is in the name, and basically they are concealing a far better name that they even expose with this name, Netanyahu. If you look at the Hebrew, Yahu, Yad, He, Wah, not Jew. Why isn't he Netan Jew? Because shouldn't he be Netan Jew? Isn't that how you say Yad He Wah? Well, no, it's not. And he knows better, doesn't he? And this proves it. So there's no doubt the deception is there. Ultimately, this is obvious. Well, think about it. They are neither Hebrew nor Greek. They are Yiddish, Jewish, where the Y is a J in their alphabet, in the Russian steppes, in Turkic languages, Slavic languages, but not in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, Latin, even German, even French, even English in ancient times, before they arrived in Europe and changed the language. Even until fairly recently in history, in fact. So that's the J. But what is the origin of the word Jew or Jews? We will deal with the migration and people groups in the Lost Tribes series. But here we will explore the language, the origin of the word Jew, just a little further. Where does it come from? What we know so far is it not only does not come from Yahudim, Yah's people, the Hebrew, nor does it come from Yahuda. That's not true either, obviously, which they try to call Judah inappropriately. Not from Hebrew, not from Israelite. It doesn't fit any of these, does it? So where, just where, did it come from? From the largest synagogue, I believe, in the world, Chabad.org, at least the largest organization worldwide. The term Jew is derived from the name of Jacob's fourth son, Judah. Now, we already proved that's wrong, right? Yehuda, we proved that's wrong too in Hebrew. So they don't know Hebrew. And may have actually, originally applied only to Judah's descendants. Why? Wrong. Who comprised one of the 12 tribes of Israel. It's backwards reasoning is what it is. It's wrong. We already proved this word did not come from Yahuda. Didn't happen. Doesn't work. They go on to identify Abraham as the first Jew. But the word does not appear in all of the Bible until modern translations. Even the 1611 KJV did not use the word Jew, but it certainly evolved the word Yahudi into another form, getting closer to it, which eventually led to Jew. And that too is unacceptable. Yes, the 1611 King James is not perfect. That's why you've got to read the Hebrew and the Greek in parallel with it to truly understand and restore the passages. They say the word originates from Judah, Yahuda, not Yehuda, and later came to refer to Benjamin and the Levites of the southern kingdom as well. Again, if this were true, it would be in Scripture, and that's never there. That is their assumption, and it's a really bad one. They also assert that the northern kingdom was not taken captive into Assyria until 500 BC, which does not fit any history we have ever read. Don't know where they got that timeline from, because by 500 BC, they were already in their final migration territories after the second Esdras migration, the second Exodus, we call it. So they are saying it was not until after the northern tribes were taken, because the northern tribes were already taken into Babylon before 500 BC. So none of it makes any sense. I don't know where this kind of stuff comes from. But the word Jew began to refer to the entire nation of Israel, all 12 tribes, well, from the beginning, because it's used that way. In Scripture, again, it's in the Old Testament 74 times, and it's used even before the separation. So it is a word referring to all 12 tribes, period. Well, at least they are partially correct, though. But see that what they're doing here? They wish to take credit for every time the word Jew is mentioned as meaning those of the tribe of Judah. Why? Because Jews claim to be of the tribe of Judah. Again, utter nonsense. Doesn't fit anything in history, nor in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, or Latin, or French, German, English, for that matter, in ancient times. But they cannot, as those were not Jews, but Yah's people, Yahudim. And they, the Jews, are the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Yahudim and are not, but do lie. And that's in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. We quote that often because most of us didn't even know that was there, because it's not taught in most churches. Again, we're talking about a word that was used in 2 Kings. Okay, we're talking about an era long before the New Testament. Long before. And yet, Haaretz.com claims the word Jew was used in 1275, but to refer to Hebrews, or the synagogue of Satan, really, not really Hebrews, because Hebrews did not migrate to Europe until far later when they were scattered among the nations. They admit, though, and this is monumental, the letter J did not appear until the 1700s. So, see, even the Jewish sources actually admit elements of what we've been telling you and have laid the foundation, but they always back off of it. They always back away, and they always lead to, well, it's Jew. It's Jew. It's Jew. Well, no, it's not Jew. You can't prove it's Jew because you start with a history in 1275 AD. And these are ancient words with ancient meanings, ancient pronunciations in ancient language, all of which had no J in the first place. So, again, sorry, this is fraud. The Jewish Encyclopedia starts its definition of the word Jew in the 17th century AD. And look at all the confusion. Let me ask you a question. Let's say you are American and you leave your country and live in another country. Let's say you marry someone from a foreign country or whatever. And in that country, they call you an Amcan for short. Okay. You then migrate to another country and they call you Acan. Then you migrate to another country, or at least your descendants do, and they call you Gacan or something similar, right? And then another, and finally they call you Can. And the last country that your people migrate to calls you Cain. So, based on that, do you look at this connotation Cain and say, well, that must mean that we descended from Cain, the evil son of Adam? No, of course not. That would be stupidity. Is there any relation in that etymology? None whatsoever. And we see this all the time from scholars because their reasoning is really that bad. Worse, would you call yourself Cain? Would you call yourself by the name that those people give you, or would you call yourself an American still? And would your descendants still call themselves an American? especially if American carried a good connotation. We understand in some countries it doesn't. But like Yahudim, Yah's people. Do you get any better connotation than that? You better believe you would use that connotation and you would not allow it to be changed. But see, remember, this is a group who decided that they would blot out the name of God and the name of Yahusha and the name of Yah's people. See, this is further evidence. They are not Yah's people. Even if someone could prove they were by blood today, which you cannot, they're not Yah's people. They're not worshiping him. They're not his people, which is really why they carry a different name and a different God. But they try to confuse themselves in because they want to make the claim that they're Yah's people. Is this not clear now? Again, all the derivatives on the screen are modern and not biblical, nor do they refer to Hebrews, Yahudim, or Yah's people. They even mischaracterize the Greek. If the last letter looks different, it's still a sigma, by the way, but sigma has two forms, so don't be confused by that. It's the same as the word we reviewed earlier. So this is the same word. There's no change here. They admit that the term Jew, really Yahudim, in biblical times referred to all 12 tribes of Israel. See, here you go, from the Jewish Encyclopedia. Though they also claim its origin was Yahuda, Judah, which they do not prove, nor does Chabad or any other Jewish source, and we have already disproven. Even Abarim Publications, a source that we enjoy and we use often, although we do certainly call them out when we find things that are inconsistent, and this is one of them. They happen to skip, all of history. I mean, come on, we're talking about Bible here. We're talking about something, a word that started at least as early as 2 Kings. So, yeah, this is an ancient word. And yet they skip all the way in the original pronunciation, and they jump right to Jew. Not even acknowledging that that is a ridiculous pronunciation of this Greek word, as well as the Hebrew, which, why aren't they rendering it in the Hebrew? Kind of weird. And has a whole lot more letters. So, no, it's wrong. One would think as a concordance they might feel the need to explain such a discrepancy, yet they do not acknowledge that this word, though not Jew, is Yahudi. And it does not refer to one from Judea only, but the whole of Israel, and that we do agree. With the etymology, they start with France. Okay? So they skip over, 1,500 years or more of history, well documented in origin? And they have to go all the way to France for the origin of the word Jew? Well, that's just really, really bad scholarship. Again, would you accept such a chaotic metamorphosis of your name when it identifies you as Yah's people? Of course not. You wouldn't tolerate the removal of his name from your name if you were his. Yah's people would not do so. They trace it back to a word that is not Jew, nor does it have a J, which came from another Greek word, which we covered is essentially the same as the Hebrew. And yes, all those same letters are essentially in Latin too, all the way through to English. So why would one need to transform? Because they're really not even transliterating. They're certainly not translating. They're transforming a word into a completely different word. It's unacceptable and absolute nonsense. Even Old French has a Y and would not substitute a G. It's a different word and does not come from the ancient Latin, which had no J, nor Greek, which didn't either. So, you don't go from Y to J in a language which has a Y. That's stupid. So where did this come from? Well, Germany is really the key. At that time, they called the new immigrants who were from where? The Russian steppes, not from France. Got that? They didn't come into Germany from France. They migrated into Germany from the Russian steppes, from the land of Ashkenaz. Now, the Germans called them, as a direct transliteration from their language, from the Russian steppes, Yiddish of Slavic origin, right? Which has a J and replaces the Y with a J. That's where that rule comes from. They called them Judy. Not because they made up a new word, but because that was the Yiddish term infused into the German language, which did not have a J either until that migration occurred, because it was accommodating the Yiddish language. It proves the origin of the term. In this instance, is the Ashkenazi, not their new land, renaming them, and not from France, and not this ridiculous long etymology that goes from one, word to the next all the way through, 20 different combinations? That's outrageous. Anyone that would allow their name to be changed so many times, that's just foolish. The German word Judy, pronounced Judy, is corresponding adjective Judish, Judy, Jewish, and is cognate with the Yiddish word for Jew, Yid, which is really pronounced Jid. See, the Y is a J in Yiddish, not any of the other languages that we discussed, none of them. So you know the origin. See, it comes from the word Jid, which isn't Yid. Remember, it's Yiddish. Y is J. That's where this comes from. So you see the origin. So it's Jid, Judy, Jude. Even the book in the New Testament bears the wrong name to attempt to justify this manipulation, to force the Jiddish word for a fake Hebrew into the language as Jew. That's what this is. See, it's all contrived. The name Jehovah. What's that really setting up? The J-E, Jew. See, that's what it's trying to set up. They're not just manipulating Yahuwah, God's name. They're trying to get to a word here that actually has a more ancient origin, and we'll show you. When they change Yahuwah to Yahweh, the U changed to a W, what are they actually doing? Well, they're trying to justify Jehovah, the J-E, Yahweh, the W, Jew. They're trying to get to the word Jew. That's what they're doing here. See, they're patient. They manipulate over centuries, over long periods of time. And this has been changed over time. It didn't just happen. Just as they didn't just arrive in Germany and all of a sudden they're called a different name. No, this was the name they called themselves. This is the name that they were called in the Russian steppes, the place of their origin of that era. Will prove their ultimate origin, which is really Persia, but we'll get there. And by the way, Persian has a J as well, and likely the origin of the Jiddish language, but we're not going to go there in this particular video. But wait, the word Judy has even more ancient origins, which ties to this people. And this may help in identifying them. Let's see. In our original canon series, we prove the Essenes lived in an area in Israel, which was their headquarters according to Pliny the Elder and many other historians, by the way. But Pliny was a geographer, and he actually gives geographic markers and tells us exactly where they lived. Now, we're told by the Pharisees that they lived in Qumran, therefore it was a pagan cult, basically, because that's what the Essenes are, let's call it what it is, was responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's why they're suppressed in the church largely, and not taught from the prophet, or from the pulpit, and why they're not being embraced, and they should be. They should at least be tested, and in general, much of the church has not. They just ignore them completely. But Pliny places them west of the Dead Sea, away from the noxious gases. Now, if you go west of the Dead Sea, and you are immediately in the mountains, as you see in this video, not far from the Dead Sea at all, then it's easy to understand his next words when he says they're located above Ein Gedi. Ein Gedi is about 25 miles south of Qumran. And it was in no way connected, number one, to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and in no way connected, number two, with the Qumran community. It has nothing to do with it. And we cover this in the original canon series, so you can see all the evidences, and we even prove that John the Baptist, who was no Essene at all in any way, shape, or form, he lived in Qumran, which is actually a modern deceptive name. Its ancient name was Bethabara, and Betharaba in Hebrew, Bethabara Greek, and we find it, and it's in Qumran. Now, the Essenes lived all over, but they trained in the wilderness of Judea in Ein Gedi. Why is this important? It was their center and homeland to which they identified. And Essenes are what? Well, they're aligned with, at least, although we'll prove they are, Pharisees. It was also known as a Persian stronghold under the Persian Empire. And wait till you see all the things we will cover regarding the pagan symbology that leads to Persia, found even in their synagogue there, that has been excavated, and the archaeology is all right there. Easy to see in plain language. But that name, Ein Gedi, has different etymologies. And one of them is Ein Judy. Judy means goat, and Ein, number one definition, is actually I, but also the word spring comes out of the word Ein, as it refers to the tear springing forth from the eye, basically, in the same vein. So it would be acceptable. Of course, the Pharisees will tell you Ein Judy means spring or fountain of a goat, but we beg to differ. Ein is more likely eye, and this is the land of the eye of the goat. Yeah, you know what that is. Now they are the Judy, and that is an origin that ties to Israel, but not to the tribes of Israel, as they always lived separate, just as the Pharisees did, who really both originate from Persia, although the Essenes went through Egypt. They migrated from Persia into Egypt, and then they actually migrated into Israel with the Exodus. So they were there, but they were always separate. And we'll prove that out in our Lost Tribes series completely. But as we said, they have Persian origins, and we will prove that. Remember, the Pharisees were the replacements for the Samaritans in the northern kingdom. They replaced the lost tribes there. And it's in their name. And so does their religion of Zoroastrian origin that they call Judaism today and say is based on the Torah, but it's actually not, according to Yahushua himself. Because he says it's against his commandments in Mark 7:9, right? The 10 lost tribes of the north were taken into modern Kurdistan, and those from that region of what was known as Media, especially, were the replacements who came into the land of northern Israel and attempted to infuse their pagan worship of Ashima, which we will cover Ashima in the next Lost Tribes video, and you are really going to be blown away by this. They worshipped Molech, who is Baal, and others, and they infused that worship with the supposed worship of Yahuwah God, which he rejected and still does. Oh, and what's in the center of modern Kurdistan? Well, there's a place there. This would be where they originated in Persia, called Mount Judy. You know, the mountain which makes a claim to be the landing site of Noah's Ark. Of course, just a petty difference between its 2,000-meter elevation and Mount Everest's 8,800-meter elevation. But forget that it's not even 25% the height required by Scripture for the landing of the ark, which was at flood crest, 15 cubits above the tallest mountain, and the fact that it's, well, north of Shinar, yet the Bible identifies Noah's descendants coming from the east of Shinar in the direction of Mount Everest. Nah, forget that. How dare we point out such, facts? The Judy are making claim after claim, aren't they? The ark, and now they are Hebrews. Neither align with Scripture, nor history, nor migration patterns. Whether these are the ultimate etymologies, though, or simply the infusion of Jiddisch into German, Latin, and Greek, it really doesn't matter, but what does matter is it has no origin in ancient Hebrew, the origin of Yahudim. Nor Greek, nor Aramaic, nor Latin for that matter. It is not the short for Yahudim or Yahudi, which would be Yaz, not Jews. And the word did not exist in history until the Renaissance, so why use it? Why replace the brand of Yah's people? Well, they are not Yah's people, but we know who is because we've located them in the Lost Tribes series. Look up the name Judy, and they'll tell you it's of Hebrew origin. And actually, they have the gall to say it comes from Yahudi. So take out the name Yah and make it a J. And I guess it works? No, that's false. That is a false narrative, and it's spun as if it's fact, and it is not. They'll also tell you it means praise, that Judy means praise just like Judah does. But that's wrong too, because Judah doesn't mean praise. It means Yahuwah be praised. Yahu be praised. According to Leah, who is the origin of the name. See, the Bible defined that, right? So they keep mixing up Yahudim, Yahudah, Yahusha, Yahuwah. It's just a big fat mess. And that is on purpose. See, these all have the same origin. Yah, Yahu. And he is being praised here. And you don't shorten Yahudim, Yahudah, Yahuwah, Yahusha. You don't shorten any of it to Jew. Period. There is absolutely no justification for that whatsoever. A couple of final notes. When did Ashkenazi Jews migrate into Germany? Wait a minute, doesn't the word Nazi seem similar? You better believe it does, and we'll go there, believe it or not. Well, they came in the 5th century AD and forward. When did the lost tribes migrate? Well, the north, about 600 BC. Of course, Chabad doesn't know that. And the southern kingdom, about 70 AD. So, is this migration connected to the lost tribes? No, it is not, because they did not migrate into the Russian steppes, and that's where these Ashkenazi Jews came from. It's the Pharisees who are not from Israel, but separate. Yes, they lived in Israel for a short time, but they're not from Israel. They were the Samaritans, they were the Persians of ultimate origin, and we will prove that. The Parsis, Pharisees, Persians, that is the same word. Regarding who the word Yahudi or Yahudim refers to, Esther is clear. It's all of Israel, as Mordecai is not from Judah, Yehuda. He's from Benjamin, yet called Yahudim, not Jew, Yah's people. We find the same in Antioch, and we covered that earlier. So we know that the lost tribes of the north who were in Kurdistan land includes the area of Antioch. The lost tribes of the north were being referred to there. So we know that this word is a reference to anyone within the 12 tribes of Israel, and actually we know we can be grafted into that. We covered that in another video. You can see the Synagogue of Satan's claims on the coins of the Royal Hasmonean dynasty. We're not going to cover this in detail, but we'll touch on this, and we're about to end this video. We trace the origin of this word in our Gog of Magog videos, Hasmonean, in our Lost Tribes series, and those are uploading very soon. They're right on the heels of these two. And all the coins of the Hasmoneans pretty much have pagan symbols, as this one does, like the double cornucopia, signaling the horn of plenty from the legends of Zeus and Hercules, which they both took part in. But look at what the Hasmoneans do here. They replace the Levites in the temple with Pharisees, and their origins are really Persians, just like the Pharisees and ultimately the Essenes, as both are the Samaritans. On one side, it says Hayahudim, meaning of Yah's people, of Yah's people. So they're making the claim. They are the synagogue of Satan who say they are Yahudim and are not, but do lie, right? And on the reverse side, it says Yahakanan, the high priest, so Jonathan, the high priest, council of the Yahudim. Who was Jonathan? He was a royal Hasmonean. They put themselves in place of the Levites. And the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about this, in the Temple Scroll especially, where it highly rebukes Jonathan. They were not Jews, and it doesn't say that, does it? This is evidence of the Samaritans taking over the temple and the priesthood, and evidence of the synagogue of Satan claiming to be Yahudim Hebrews, yet they are not, but do lie. But more so, it's complete evidence that they didn't necessarily call themselves Jews. They were trying to take over the name Yahudim. So in both Hebrew and Greek, and really pretty much same in Latin, French, German, and English, Yahudi or Yahudim is a valid pronunciation or close to it. And there would be no need to make up a new word, especially not one that has none of the letters of the word, of the original word. None. So the real question is, did Yah's people change their name? Well, why would they? They are Yah's people. Who would ever change that? Why on earth would they ever allow anyone else to change that name and display of his possession? They would not. This is because one using the term Jew to refer to themselves is not of the tribes of Israel principally. Sure, some are confused and deceived, just as many Jews are deceived, because they don't necessarily know what's going on either. But the Pharisees at the top certainly know, as they operate in the hoarding of secret knowledge. See, because they're Essene. Essene is actually an Egyptian word meaning secret. Very simple. Certainly they know, as they operate in that dimension. So imagine this. We are branded Yah's people. That is amazing, and we wouldn't change that for anything. And remember, if you're not of the lost tribes, you can still be grafted in. And we cover that in the previous videos in the Grafted into the Kingdom video in the Lost Tribe series. Thank you for watching the Name of God series. Please share this video with others and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the bell and view our website at thegodculture.com. Always remember to prove all things for yourself. Yahuwah God bless.